Welcome to CyberSecurity Heroes, an IRONSCALES podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with security leaders and practitioners and other influential InfoSec stars, so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IRONSCALES, the most powerfully simple email security platform. And I'm your host, Brendan Rudd. And now, let's get into the show. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. It's coming up for CyberSecurity Heroes 1-year anniversary, and I wanted to thank you so much for being part of the journey and for your support. It's really taken off, and I appreciate all the positive feedback. So to celebrate our anniversary, I put together a montage of all the best quotes from the last year, primarily 2021. So enjoy. And I look forward to bringing you more amazing guests to share their knowledge so we can all become safer and stronger together. Understanding OT security and how it differs from IT with Tom Jackson.
A lot of today's marketed solutions for cyber are targeted on the enterprise. But if you flip the coin over, there's the flip side, which is the OT, or the operational technology component. And what that focuses on is a lot of times it's just easy to think of it as the industrial space. So virtually every company makes, manufactures, produces, sells, pumps, boils, does something to produce money. And that's going to be the operational side. So I think the three items that come to most people's minds when I say in industry are going to be in the critical infrastructure, which is going to be things like power utility, oil, gas, chemical. But that list goes on all the way to amusement parks, manufacturing, hospitals. It's a very, very broad area, operational technology. And it does differ from IT. I think one of the most important things when people first hear about OT or read about it, I think they tend to look at it because it's cyber, they tend to deal with it from a technical issue. I think it's easier. And in my opinion, the way I approach it is I look at it from the environment. OT and IT are two different environments. And what I mean by that is when you look at OT, it's there to produce. It's there to keep things running, to have uptime. A lot of IT cyber does not necessarily inherently benefit the OT from that approach. And so when people first go outside the kingdom, if you would, to go look at the village is different. It's a different environment. You're dealing with systems that last 10, 20, 15, 30 years. That's what they're built. They're built for incredibly long time frames. As such, most of these systems that run our plants, I always like to look at PLCs and SCADA and HMI. This is where all these acronyms come together. But really, at the end of the day, these systems predate the modern computer system. So what does that mean? Well, it means there was no protocol that we look at today. There wasn't a common programming language. These big companies that manufacture these systems built them as they designed and invented them. So there's a lot of custom protocols, there's a lot of custom functionality that you don't see today in computer systems. And as such, cybersecurity was never built in. Maybe the need for a password was never built in. So when a lot of people look at the technology behind OT, they're mystified that all this great technology and things that we can take advantage of in the OSI model aren't there. And therefore, you have to now take 10, 15 steps back because these OT are purpose-built. You're not going to see a laptop hooked up to every process. You're going to see older computer systems. It's not unusual to find Windows 7 everywhere, XP everywhere. And the reason is that is not seen as a computer system. It's seen as a tool.
bringing email security to the forefront with Chuck Siros.
Right. So when I attack email, there's just two things that have to happen. First, I have to trick you into clicking and then on something in some way. Just getting the email is not enough to do anything. I have to trick you enough to make you perform an action. And then I become you. Then it's completely over. There's nothing you can do about it. But those two things have to happen. And everybody ignores the first one. Is it fraud? Should it land in the inbox in the first place? And you have to have technologies in place to see that. If you're on-prem, the advanced intelligence from the cloud-based technologies, get it. It's going to be hard to live without it soon. If you're already in the cloud, look for cloud-based technologies that can map to your business and understand how your business operates and your common communicators for partners and things like that. Once you know your partners, you're not really susceptible to BEC and supply chain attacks. Once you know who you normally communicate with, it's really hard to step in there and pretend to be one of those without setting off a bunch of alarms.
Rethinking Cyber Education with Josh Mason.
If you have an entry-level job, if you need someone to be a SOC analyst, to sit in front of the screen, look for alerts, and follow the response plans that you put in front of them, that doesn't take a whole lot. You just need them to understand what they're doing. They don't have to come up with them. They don't need to understand all of the business needs and everything about risk mitigation in your organization. You need them to do that. Then you can teach them those other things. And those other concepts, they're not that cosmic. They can be taught. I teach them. There's a lot of roles in the DoD infrastructure that require you to have a degree. A lot of GS positions, government service positions, that's not what GS stands for, but you're like military civilians, they have to hold degrees to hold certain positions. And then that has ripple effects as well. A lot of contracts, if you have people in certain positions, they need to hold degrees. And that reverberates through the rest of the industry because it's such a giant. And then you end up with this weird situation of everyone coming out with these cybersecurity degrees where what do they learn? You really don't need 4 years of intense study to learn cybersecurity. If you did that, I would expect you to come out knowing a whole lot more than most 22-year-olds. If someone's coming in with nothing, what I tell them to do, put this on my LinkedIn, I tell it to everyone who asks, if you know nothing, what you can do for free and easy is go to like ProfessorMesser.com and listen to Professor Messer teach you all about hard drives and processors and memory and data cables and Wi-Fi capabilities, all of your A+. And then, because all of his videos for A+, and then Network+, and then Security+, are all free on his website. You can also find these things also on YouTube, or your local library might even have study guides for all of them. Go and learn the information. You're not going to get in anywhere being like, I don't know how to turn on a computer or log in. No one wants you to, no one's going to hire you in tech if you don't have basic knowledge.
Phishing incident response from the trenches with Jeremy Hood.
But as far as dealing with the everyday phishing emails that are coming in, I mean, we've worked with Microsoft's security team to go in and fine-tune this to the best of what we can with the licensing level that we have. And there's still lots of stuff that gets through. Maintaining block lists, just setting up rules like filters to send emails to a quarantine versus sending it on to a user. I mean, that only works to an extent. A lot of these threat actors that are sending out these phishing emails are coming up with unique ways to bypass those filters and keep them going into, users' mailboxes. Microsoft has a part that we use that, if we classify an email as phishing, we can resubmit it or take an email that somebody has submitted, and we can submit it up to Microsoft's AI, and it goes through and looks at the email, and then it'll determine, yeah, this shouldn't have gone through, or yeah, this should have went through, even though on some of those where they say, yeah, it should have been delivered, we look at it and we're like, no, it shouldn't have been delivered. This is an obvious phish. I've got a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity, but the schooling will only take you so far. A lot of what you're going to learn is going to be in the trenches, at work, working with the people beside you that have been there longer and listening to them, learning from them. And I mean, you'll gain so much more knowledge actually working with those people, and go to conferences. Biggest thing right now is every company is doing some sort of webinar. A lot of them are free. Jump on the webinar, absorb that knowledge. All it's going to do is help you out. Some of it was self-taught, just doing my own research, learning, PowerShell commands. Some of it was working with the other two guys that were on the information security team, stuff that they had learned. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just going out, finding the information. Google is your best friend for that type of stuff. Just put in a search, how to purge emails from a Microsoft system. And if you dig enough, you'll come across the commands that you need, and just take that stuff, put it in like a text document or something like that, keep it handy. And then the more you're in there, the faster you'll learn it. And yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the stuff that I've learned with being in this position has been Googling it, doing a search for it, asking for help from fellow coworkers that may have already done this before, and just learn that way. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
How to make cybersecurity culture part of company culture with the cybermaniacs.
You have a much more complicated tapestry when you start to talk about cyber culture, because there's culture that's already there before the cybersecurity requirements showed up. And there's culture being bred and culture developing and strengthening in and away from the regulatory compliance efforts and the experiences that you're trying to have your employees share with one another around cybersecurity. So you can influence culture towards behaviors that are more in line with what you want out of cybersecurity. But a lot of the conversations that I think we've been having are around the idea that you can't just sort of define what cyber culture is and then drop it into an organization, because without taking a baseline and really understanding the culture that's already there, because you're not going to replace it. You might change it a little bit, but you're not going to replace it. I think those exercises, as painful as they were, there was a huge step forward in terms of beginning to help HR professionals get a snapshot into some of the risks that were being managed on the IT side. And similarly, a real healthy view, I think, on the IT and the cybersecurity side in terms of the types of issues that HR have to grapple with, whether it's, mental health issues or whether it's, family issues. And, that idea of sensitive data, I think, started a cooperation there. It was the first time, at least in my career, where HR teams were like, okay, we have to own this data. How do we protect our data? And then coming to the IT teams in a consultative fashion to start to figure out how are we going to do this. I thought that was, again, as painful as it was sort of a watershed moment as far as I can see.
Bringing neglected cybersecurity basics to the forefront with E.J. Hilbert.
I've been doing this for 25 years. There's nothing new here. If people are aware of how the bad guys do what they do, the bad guys, the bad gals do what they do, that's the only way that we can develop ways to stop them. There are far smarter people out there than I will ever be that will hear about, oh, they did da-da-da-da-da. And the immediate response is, oh, well, why didn't you just do X, Y, and Z to fix it? And you go, oh, why didn't I just do that? I don't think about that because our environment, our world, I think I've said it on your other podcast with the group, there is no such thing as a computer security expert. You can claim you are, but you're not. There's just too many elements of what is done. You can be a security professional. You You can be an expert in one area. Maybe you're an expert in identity and access management. Maybe you're an expert in configuration. Maybe you're an expert in network security. Somebody like me who's a jack of all trades, we do a little bit of all of it, but there is no such thing as a true expert. So learning from each other is our key. You need a strategy from the beginning. You need to understand, we've been, again, something that's been said. What are your real risks? Not the stuff you heard on the news. What are your real risks? How do you do business? How do you get your supplies? What is the cyber risk associated with that? Okay? Then, how do we address those risks? Do we accept them because it's just the cost of doing business? Which is basically what we've been doing for every cyber risk across the board. Do we mitigate them somehow, fix the problem that's causing that risk to be? Do we, do we remediate them? That's to fix it. Do we mitigate it by shifting the risk, liability, insurance, things of that nature? By the way, if you think you're going to shift it to insurance, you're wrong. Insurance companies paid out more in the last 2 years than they've ever paid in their existence because of ransomware attacks. They are going to double, if not triple or quadruple, the cost associated with it. And there is going to be a cause-effect requirement. You think you have ransomware in insurance? They're going to say, what did you do to protect it against it? Oh, you didn't do this? You didn't do... Sorry, we don't pay that. Or the last one is you simply avoid it. You just don't do what is risky. All right? So you can accept it, you can remediate it, you can mitigate it, or you can avoid it completely.
Never trust, always verify with Kevin Bailey.
It will take some time to put this in. So if somebody says that, I can put a zero trust solution in and we can have it up and running in 3 months. Sorry, but you can't. We know how long organizations take, not only for your own department, for a security department to put these together, but you're dealing with the wider aspect of the organization, because some of these will change the way that people work. You don't want to impact their resources, but that may happen. So the value of deploying zero trust principles and concepts that connects anything across your network is immense, but it's going to take time to do it. Problem is, if you don't start now, you never will. That time just keeps moving. If you're looking to put a new solution in, you're putting a new system in, we're talking about operational technology as well as standard IT, then look and see how you could use that as the starting point for your zero trust model going forwards. So as long as you're looking at this from a always verify viewpoint, you're trying to stop the air gaps from opening up.
Want to combat cybersecurity? Look for insider threats in your circle of trust with Daniel Stegman, Mark Sangster, and EJ Hilbert.
What we've seen, even with like the SolarWinds type of approach, a vendor, a trusted vendor that you rely on and believe is going to share or is going to do the right thing before sharing information with you is also an insider threat, because they are inside of your realm or your trust bubble. How's that? That's a better way to put it. And if they're inside that trust bubble, we give them a little more leniency and we don't dig as deeply into it. So that's kind of the world here. And then we should also mention that they're not always malicious. Sometimes they're unintentional threats that we just don't even know happens. It's like the kid bringing the peanut butter sandwich to school and not knowing that everybody around him is allergic to peanut butter. They didn't intend to do it. It just happens that way.
If we include humans in this, if we include phishing and supply chain, right, vendors and partners, then it does have to be a top priority of whatever security program that you have. And I think one of the best ways that you can kind of push that along the tracks is to work with the executives and get them involved, right? Because you want to get them out of the mindset that cybersecurity is an IT problem to solve, and more, like EJ said, it's a business risk to manage, right? So help them understand. So for example, if you are using, let's say, a traditional insider kind of, sabotage or theft type of threat, then walk through that scenario as a tabletop and have them understand, like, are you prepared? Can you collect the forensics that you would need to potentially hand over to law enforcement for prosecution?
Penetration testing explained with Juan Carlos.
Another misconception is that pen testing is only for large companies or big companies, but it's not true. Cyber attacks hit big companies, but also smaller businesses. A pen test can also help these businesses to remain secure. But most of the companies think that because they are a small company, they don't need to test their security. The third one, I think that there is one misconception that a pen test concentrates only on the technical aspects of the test, but that's not true. You can have, there's a traditional penetration test that evaluates network applications and devices, but a pen test can also include the evaluation of the physical security, trying to get physical access to the premises of the company. And you can also run a penetration test as a part of the evaluation of the human factor by performing a social engineering attack, tricking employees into performing actions or divulging confidential information.
The 5 Incident Response Playbook Against Cyber Attacks with JJ Davey.
Organizations don't have these kind of basic, I'm doing air quotes here, basic security controls in place. So they're falling victim to this business email compromise because they've just lost their credentials, or their credentials have been reused in other breaches. And these attackers are just hoping that they can get into your account by replaying these credentials. So we're starting to see that while this, deployments of cloud and these other services bring a lot of convenience to organizations, they also bring a lot of risk to organizations. And the reason is this is because you're trading convenience with security, but it doesn't always have to be that way. You can offer lots of security. You've got your cloud access security brokers, you've got your two-factor authentication or your accounts, you've got context-based authentication, single sign-on. You've got all these different security controls that you can implement at your cloud level. So if these credentials did get breached, then at least you've got two-factor authentication that makes it that extra bit difficult to get breached. You also need to understand your environment. So you need to have the network diagrams, you need to have the flow charts of how these systems work together. So when something does happen, you're not there having to learn these systems. You can pick up these diagrams and say, okay, that connects to there, that connects to there. This could be the route of attack. So straight away, you've got a picture of what could happen. You also want to have relevant threat in feeds. So if you have all these different security products, such as firewalls, SIM tools, they normally have threat feeds built into place. Make sure they're turned on, because I guarantee you they're going to come in handy, especially when you're reviewing your findings of a cybersecurity incident.
The 8 Steps to Building a Phishing Awareness Security Program with Shyla Treadwell.
The other thing that a lot of people struggle with is that you're doing awareness and you're doing training, and they're not the same thing. And I'll take it even a step further. Education is not the same thing. It's awareness and training as well. So having to take the time to explain to people what to look out for and then what to do in response to it are 2 separate activities. And that's the difference between awareness and then training. And those are my big beliefs when it comes down to phishing awareness and things that I'm passionate about, because people learn differently. And it's really important that we understand that awareness is a holistic activity. It's not just something that people do by themselves. And you have to ingrain that in the culture of your organization. It was really, really touching because we were having lunch one day and someone came over and said, hey, you told me about looking for emails like this and stuff like that. And I ended up getting one at home. And I made sure that I remembered what you said about that. And think about that. They're not talking about the company they're supporting. They're talking about a behavior that they were doing at home. But if I can get someone to get into the habit of doing something in their personal life, I can definitely get them to do it at work because it's already ingrained in their behaviors. So I think that that's why behavioral change and awareness is so important. And training, no matter how good it is, we can have ninjas in it. We can have all kinds of stuff in the training. It's not about the training. It's about how I leverage that training to promote awareness throughout the year so that people can remember it. It takes 7 to 12 times before someone builds a habit, which means that I can't just tell them it once a year.
Why we're losing the war on cybersecurity and how to fix it with Christian Espinoza.
Our industry in cybersecurity, and in any industry where you have super smart people that are, very intellectually smart, part of their identity is to be smarter than other people. So when that's part of your identity, you do things to prove you're smarter than other people, and those same things inhibit communication with clients, with management, with your team, because if you're always speaking over someone's head and you feel like they're stupid because they don't understand what you're saying, then they're not going to understand it, right? And we need to learn to alter our communication. So egos is one of them. And also, there's a lot of gatekeepers in the industry that are keeping people from joining the industry, which is contributing to the skill shortage in my mind. And that again is the ego, because if I'm like a hiring manager and I have a 4-year degree and I've got a CISSP and a Sec Plus, then I'm not going to want to hire someone that doesn't have those same things, because otherwise it'd be devaluing my own, my own skills or my own credentials, basically. Second reason is lack of risk comprehension. Based on my experience of almost 30 years in the industry, I don't think a lot of people in cybersecurity really understand risk. They may understand a vulnerability, but they don't really tie that to an impact. And how that shows up is we try to protect everything equally because there's no priorities. And I'm a believer that you can't protect everything equally. You've got limited resources, so you need to prioritize what you protect. And I used to work with this guy, and this is a good example, I always think of this, where he had these 2 projects he was working on, and he went to ask his boss, he said, which of these 2 take priority? And his boss told them they are both equal priority. And this guy I used to work with said, okay, I guess I'll do both of them half-assed, meaning, you can't do everything equally well. And in cybersecurity, we try to do everything equally well, which is problematic. We should focus on the top things that matter. One of the things that I did when I had my own company is I used to think I just need to hire people based on how technically smart they were. And I realized that almost every problem I had in my organization was not because somebody wasn't technically smart enough. It was because somebody didn't have people skills. So since then, I sort of flipped the script on hiring, and I looked for people that were a good cultural fit, met our core values, they had passion about cybersecurity, and they had the right attitude and the right aptitude. And then if they have those things, I could teach them as an employer. I could teach them the technical skills with on-the-job training, help them go through Sec Plus material, or whatever they need to know from a foundational perspective, and help them succeed in their career. A lot of employers, though, think, well, if I train somebody, then they're going to leave and go somewhere else. There's always a risk, but you have to do other things in your culture to want to keep that person working there with you.
How to find cybersecurity products that actually work with Adrian Sanabria.
When there's an airplane accident, that report's public. It gets published. And even the ones that aren't public, they're shared with the people that need to see them. On the cybersecurity side, a lot of that's private. In a lot of cases, it's just the company that had the breach, maybe the insurance company and the company that did the investigation. If a third party did the investigation, they're the only ones that really know what happened. So the industry doesn't get to improve from that. We don't get to learn that, maybe it was a technical control failure or a process failure. So we're all just guessing at this point. The people making the products are guessing, the people buying the products are guessing and hoping, that this is the solution. And there's just not enough data. There's not enough of an intentional approach with a closed loop, to determine, yes, this is going to be effective or not. Most of the time when you see product testing, like AV testing is kind of the classic example. It's been around for years and years and years. This product captured or detected 180 samples out of 200 This one only detected 170 out of 200 or something like that, which is, I guess that's useful knowledge. I think if you run that 2 weeks later, the two numbers could be flipped, and then 2 weeks after that, maybe they're flipped again, or maybe they're the same. So I don't see it as terribly important. I think it's inherently like a laziness in coming up with the methodology. Like that's the easiest thing to address. And yes, that is, effectively what matters in the product, how much of this malware is it going to stop? But what also matters is how many people does it take to run the product and to maintain it? What kind of skills do those people need to have? What are the requirements of it, or prerequisites, for using this product? What's the UI and the UX like? And that goes to labor quite a bit too.
The 5 Laws of Cybersecurity and How to Follow Them with Nick Espinoza.
The cybersecurity community itself has been focused very heavily on identity management because we have so many stolen usernames and passwords out there, but we're also really looking at supply chain assurance because it's not just us defending our own house. If we're giving part of our data out to another house somewhere, we have to get assurances that that house is defended in a way to keep our data safe as well. And that's something that I think a lot of companies are really starting to come into focus to as they realize, oh my God, half the breaches we're seeing at least are third parties that are getting us hit. And that's obviously a huge problem we've got right now. The billing system got hit, not the pipeline itself. And I think that really also opens up another can of worms here in the sense that because it's considered critical infrastructure in the United States, they shouldn't have been allowed to shut the gas down once they verified that that network was operational and was free from infection in that way, shape, or form, because the billing is secondary to that point because they caused a national panic on the Eastern Seaboard. That's a huge problem. It's like 100 million people or so or more that were affected by this in the United States. So that was a huge, huge problem and just bewildering. But to your point, Brendan, everybody heard that the pipeline got shut down, and that's an issue. And I think the other thing that really underscores too is breach disclosure notifications. I'm 100% for that. I think everybody that gets a breach should have to disclose, but when it's critical pipelines or critical infrastructure, maybe wait a week, maybe get it cleaned up, because there was enough gas at every gas station to withstand the days that they had shut off the pipeline.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cybersecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing or following through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.